All right, guys. Welcome to episode 2 of Be Kind. Today we are in the same spot we were last time, except for I am solo. Some of the episodes here will be solo, and the other episodes will have a guest. Today, Dave is still here. He's behind the scenes, making sure I don't sound ridiculous and making sure everything runs smooth. If you're here, hopefully you already know who I am. I'm Amanda. If you don't know me, nice to meet you. And today we're going to talk about New Year's resolutions. If you're listening to this right now, we are in 2021. And I'm sure that a lot of us feel the same way. It probably feels like, please God, let 2021 be better than 2020. And in that sense, you know, it's already better. It's already going to be better. There's no way, right, that it could be. Let's not say that out loud. So I want to talk about New Year's resolutions today because I had been asked by a friend what I thought about New Year's resolutions. And I realized that, one, I hadn't really sat down and hashed out how I felt about them because I've probably only set about 3 New Year's resolutions in my whole life. And number 2, I just am not that fond of a resolution that we make for ourselves that is something that we're just automatically going to adopt for our lives without kind of sitting with it for a second and determining why we want that thing. So this came in the form of a few friends reaching out to me and in the form of me posting on social media what you guys thought about New Year's resolutions. And one of my friends sent something to me that really kind of sparked the idea for this to be a podcast, something that we can come to and kind of come together on and decide what our resolution is going to be, even or if we even make one. So I'm going to start this with the definition of resolution. And the solid, concrete definition of resolution is a firm decision to do or to not do something. And I think that in relation to the message that my friend had sent me, the takeaway from the definition of resolution for me that kind of really just rubs me the wrong way is firm. I found that if I am firm on most things and don't offer some flexibility, there's really no room for forgiveness and growth if I'm super set or solid on any one idea. I think that having solid ideas and solid morals for yourself is important, but I also think that there are so many facets of the ways that we approach something like a resolution that deserves flexibility rather than something firm. A lot of you said the same thing when you came to me with your idea for a resolution. There were many of you who said something along the lines of, why wait for a new year? Why can't we start resolutions now? And I agree with that 110%. I think that in my lifetime, I have only set 3 New Year's resolutions. And one of the 3 is a really good example of how we walk into these resolutions and we meet something hard, and then all of a sudden everything falls apart. We don't know how to handle the hard thing with this brand new resolution that we've made for ourselves because it's something completely new and we haven't wrapped our brains around it yet. So this New Year's resolution for me probably shows up in your life in one way or another. It's probably not the same as mine, but my New Year's resolution one year, one of the only 3 that I had ever made, was to never eat fast food for that entire year and maybe for the rest of my life. So for the entire year, I was to not eat fast food ever. And that counts for everything. It was anything that was not cooked as a home cooked meal was fast food. So my family every year took vacations. My grandparents and my sister, we'd jump in the car every year and we'd go to Florida. And on the way down to Florida, naturally, my grandparents didn't want to stop and spend too much time in any one place. So fast food was the option. And, thinking about your New Year's resolution, when you encounter that first happening that feels like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get around this? Like my fast food experience. My options were eat fast food or eat fast food. There was no option there, or not eat. And my options were Subway or maybe Wendy's and maybe a Long John Silver's or something like that. And I could have done one of two things. I could have eaten fast food on that day and said, screw my resolution for the rest of my year and possibly life. I'm just going to eat fast food once a week, twice a week. Who knows? Or I could have looked at that and said in my 15-year-old brain, you know what? I'm going to have fast food because it's the only option for me right now. And then I'm going to pick back up on my resolution. But how many times do you hit that first roadblock in your resolution and immediately you, instead of turning to, okay, this was a slip up, I can pick back up tomorrow, you turn to, I'm a worthless piece of crap and I made this giant mistake, and obviously I'm not meant to achieve my resolution at all because I can't even get over this one little hiccup in this. And maybe it's not fast food for you. It was fast food for me that year. Maybe for you it's something like smoking, or something like you want to spend less time on the internet scrolling social media, or you want to eat less pizza this year, or maybe it's something more spiritual. Maybe you have a different goal. But the minute that you hit that hard thing, you're just filled with guilt and shame, and you feel like you haven't made any progress at all. So that brings me to what my friend had sent me when I asked you guys on social media what you thought about New Year's resolutions. She said something to me that was so relatable, not only in my life, but I just see it translate well across the board for goals in general, and how sometimes we psych ourselves out of trying to achieve anything when we hit something that feels like a limit. So I'm going to read you that message and then we'll continue. So this friend came to me with another friend of mine to yoga class. We're not super close, but we have a lot of common experiences. And she sent this to my Instagram story when I asked yay or nay on resolutions. And I'm so glad that she was so vulnerable with me and kind of just jumped up on her soapbox, because what she said really summed up how I feel about New Year's resolutions. So she said, resolutions feel like solving conflicts or wrongdoings, quote unquote, making things right. And that leads to feeling guilty about how you've been living. And that's just such a big downer. I like to have an intention and set some big and small goals, give myself grace if I don't get there, and keep doing the best I can with what I have instead. So when she sent that to me, my first thought was about how we set big goals. And when we set these big goals, we don't really sometimes sit with ourselves and say, okay, why? Why do I want this big thing? What does it mean to me? And I think that if we don't set a solid foundation for why we want these big things, there's no way that we can decide what the little steps are to get there. And then if we don't know what the little steps are, how are we going to get there? How are we going to reach one little step, maybe have a slip up and not fall all the way back to the bottom, and maybe never try to get back up and try again? So in this message that she sent to me, I realized how even I approach simple things, regardless of New Year's or not. Something that's been like consistent for me is setting goals in the gym. And I think to myself, okay, I'm a power lifter now. I'm going to start powerlifting. I'm going to go to all these meets. I'm going to be the strongest female at these meets. And then I don't actually sit down and decide why I want this thing, right? So then I get in, I do a little bit of work. I hire myself a powerlifting coach, which her and I are still friends now, and she's a great human being, and she coached me a lot more than just on powerlifting without knowing it. But I never sat with myself and said, okay, why do you want this thing? Do you actually want to be strong, or do you just want to be seen? So then I tried a few lifts, and she set up like a mock meet for me. And when I didn't hit goals that I thought I should be hitting, I gave up. And I think that happens for all of us. You know, we reach for something. When we don't reach this marker that we think that we have in our head for where we should be, we just fall off and we give up. But on the flip side, there's also things that happen that are out of our control. You know, the thing that I did in my head with powerlifting was something just in my head. But what happens when we meet something like 2020 and we had all these big goals for ourselves and something out of our control, like a pandemic that keeps us inside of our house happens? You know, what happens then? What happens with the goal that we had then? It completely unravels, obviously, because now our lifestyle is so different. And we then have to do this thing where we decide either to give up altogether and just wait it out, or we take the opportunity like something, we take the opportunity that was presented to us by something like quarantine, and we decide, okay, how are we going to pivot through this? How are we going to take control over things that how are we going to decide the things that we actually can take control over and the things that we really can't? How are we going to be flexible in still maybe working toward this resolution or goal, and kind of give up, the power you think you have over it? How can we still move in its general direction without forcing it? And that really comes back around to why you want the thing that you're trying to work on. And that can be super personal. It can be so personal. For me, I never really wanted to work on anything like a resolution until I was sick of myself. So one of the 3 resolutions that I had ever set for myself was the beginning of 2019. And I had, ever since I had my daughter, which was 2 years before 2019, I had just come to this, she brought me to this realization that I needed to change a lot of things about myself. And when that happened, it was kind of like the beginning of maybe a resolution, maybe a year process that turned into a 4-year process. But that resolution for me in 2019 was that I was just gonna sit with myself. I was just gonna get to know myself. And that probably happened for a lot of us at the beginning of March when the world shut down. You know, we were trapped in our houses and we had to sit with ourselves. So that thing happened for me because I chose it in 2019. And it started with this workshop that I went to. Really randomly. Please don't laugh at me. Okay, you can laugh at me. It's totally fine. I went to this workshop I'm laughing at myself now because I realize how ridiculous it sounds. I went to this workshop from this girl that I met on Instagram. And she was one of those like influencer girls that like doesn't exist anymore because she realized that maybe she was full of crap or maybe not. I don't know. She changed my life for the better. So maybe she wasn't. Who knows? So this girl that no longer exists anymore on social media, she exists somewhere in the world, but it's not here on Instagram. And she hosted this workshop that she invited people to learn how to find out your purpose based on the things that lived inside of you already. And I was like, that's interesting. It sounds magical. I wonder how many people I will meet there that will be like me, completely lost. And I can create community with people like that. So I went. I was terrified. If you'd told 2019 Amanda that I'd have been sitting in front of you right now doing a podcast, I would have said absolutely freaking not. There's no way. Really wanted to cuss there, but I'm not sure that I want to do that on my show yet. Even though Dave did on episode 1.
It's just how I talk.
We'll address that at a later date. So I decided to go to this workshop. And in this workshop, she tells us basically that if you don't know your purpose yet, you're not listening. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to put that. But it's true. So she encouraged us to journal. And I've always been the kind of person that liked to write, but I always had a hard time like consistently journaling. So when she asked us to do it, she gave us time in this workshop to actually just kind of let it out. And whatever she inspired in us that day by just asking us to be honest with ourselves, I was able to just let it out. And when I left that workshop, I realized that I didn't need to be so. This is where I was going before I said that I didn't want to cuss on my show. I was so reserved going into that workshop. I was so unsure of myself and very, I don't know, timid. Maybe that's the best word for the person that I was. And I still am kind of timid. But leaving that workshop, I felt more able to be with myself and be more certain of the things that I wanted. So I decided in that moment that I was going to take the rest of 2019 to continue that process of trying to figure out who the heck Amanda was. And in doing that, I found some super crazy things. I found some crazy things that I was holding on to that I shouldn't have been holding on to. And that still happens to me today, as I think it should for the rest of our lives. But I also found some things that I thought were me that weren't me. And when I did all of those things, when I kind of took this personal inventory, or something that I like to call now involved curiosity, when I just chose to be curious about who I was and why I wanted the things that I wanted, I found out that some of the things I thought I wanted, I didn't. And the things that I thought that I wanted that actually kind of led me into a lot of the things that I genuinely enjoy now were not always the easy choices at first. And a lot of things stood in my way. And I had to get super honest with myself about things that I could achieve being comfortable and things that I would have to move out of my comfort zone to achieve. And I think that that's also something that's really hard. I think that, you know, you hit something that you think is a limit. Like, I'm going to give you a good example just because it just happened to me this weekend. So when we're reaching for something that we think maybe we can't achieve, we kind of set this limit for ourselves in our heads. Like, Cindy can do that, and Cindy can do it for 3 minutes, but I definitely can't do that because I'm not Cindy. So we set this imaginary limit for ourselves in our heads, So then when we move forth to actually try to achieve that thing, we don't get anywhere near how much we're actually capable of because we've set that false limit. So I am a big fan of Wim Hof, and I have recently read more about him and started reading the book that he wrote. So I've adopted some of the breathing techniques that he practices and teaches, and kind of have started to just implement them in my own life. And this past weekend, I decided that if Wim Hof can sit in an ice bath for an hour and 40 minutes, hour and 50 minutes, that I should definitely try to at least sit in the cold water for, I don't know, 15 seconds. That seems reasonable. So this past weekend, I went on a little like post-Christmas cabin getaway. And while I was there, there was a creek in the backyard. And as soon as I got there and I saw the creek, I thought to myself, I'm getting in that creek sometime this weekend. There was still about 5 inches of snow outside, and there was ice on a portion of the creek. So I knew it was cold enough. And on the second day that I was there, I put my bathing suit on. I went out, got in the hot tub, and I was just staring at this creek. And I was like, don't think about it, just go do it. So I did. I jumped out, went over to the creek. My feet were no longer cold for some reason. Something inside of me had just switched off in my head, and my feet weren't frozen anymore walking on the snow. And I get to the creek and I just get in and I just sat down, and I was like, okay, now breathe. So I did the breathing technique that he teaches, which you're supposed to breathe before you get in the creek. And there's a lot of things that are supposed to happen before you do it, but you know, sometimes you just have to go for it. Depending on what it is. I mean, please be safe. Don't jump in a race car and think that you can. Just don't. Be safe, please. So I sit in this creek, and I as soon as I'm in and I'm breathing, I look at my skin and I feel it tingling, but for some reason it doesn't feel like it's part of me anymore. Like I'm just okay in this creek that's, I don't know, maybe like 16 degrees. I really don't know. I don't have a gauge for that. It's got to be below 30. It's frozen. So in that moment, I realized that the limit that I had set for myself was somehow completely false. And I probably still only sat in that creek for maybe 30, 40 seconds. It wasn't nearly an hour and 50 minutes, but I think that that's another thing that we do for ourselves on the other side of, well, Cindy can do that thing, but I can't do that thing. So we set ourselves a really low limit. And on the other side of that, we see someone who has partaken in their journey for Wim Hof's been doing what he's doing for 50 years. You know, I'm comparing myself sitting in this creek to someone who's been, he's 50 years ahead of this journey that I have started on. And because of social media, we can do that so easily now. We can see people all around the world doing things that we want to do, but maybe we're scared to because we can't measure up. And I think that that's ridiculous. I think that in that moment, I chose to be really proud of myself for even putting my body in that cold water instead of saying, well, you only did it for this long and that's nothing. So going through that dance that we do with limits, where are you willing to sit in that and decide exactly where you are and where you want to move toward? And again, I said this in the beginning, like the general direction of the thing that you're trying to work on is the goal. Moving in its general direction is the goal. And, it's just like one of those old school, like pinball games where you get your ball all the way to the top and it might bounce back down a little bit, but you can catch it in the middle and boost it back up. It's the same thing. It's the same thing for our goals. So realizing along the way the things that we have control over, like me sitting in that water. I had control of my breath and I had control of my body. Thank goodness, still. Halfway through the little 30-second trip that I took in there, I started thinking, how long is it really safe to be in here? When will I lose control of my limbs? When will I stop being able to move my arms as fast as I could before? So through your journey, you have to just keep checking in with yourself and keep reminding yourself that you have a reason that you want to work toward this thing. And maybe your why changes. Maybe your why in the beginning isn't your why at the end, and that's okay. That's also okay. I'm going to look through my notes here. Dave yelled at me for having so many notes, but I knew there was things that I would forget to talk about. He's laughing at me right now.
I knew they would be necessary. I just wanted to make sure we kept it to a minimum. I have notes now, too.
Oh, good. Let's talk about one more thing, because I think that this is so important. The thing that you're going to try to work on, whether you decide to set a resolution or not, maybe this thing doesn't happen for you until, March or halfway through the year in June, whenever you decide to work on this thing, big or small. It's really important to, after you've sat with this thing and decided that you're going to start working on it, realizing that where you start is also very important. If you've just had a baby and you're 2 weeks out of having this baby, maybe now is not the best time to decide to start doing 200 sit-ups in the morning. If you have just come through the pandemic and you are still without a job, maybe this isn't the time to buy a ton of supplements and start going to the gym. Maybe instead, if you are that new mom, maybe your goal is to get up in the morning, maybe just 5 or 10 minutes before your very needy infant gets up and demands things of you during the day. Maybe you find 5 or 10 minutes to just sit and journal what your workout program is going to look like after you have had the time to heal and adapt to this new change in your life. The point that you start this new thing is so important, because your willpower for this thing that you want to achieve is the same willpower that you're using all day long to get out of bed and to take care of your family during the day, and the same willpower it takes to maybe choose to drink water instead of bourbon. This willpower that you have is essentially a muscle, and this muscle, just like the muscles in your body, gets fatigued. And once you've exhausted this willpower muscle, you're gonna want to make choices that do not lead you in the direction of this new thing that you're gonna work on. So being mindful of all of the stressors on your life while you're trying to move toward this new thing is really essential. And that doesn't mean that you can't work on it now. That doesn't mean that you can't be mindful of the direction that you want to move in. It just means that maybe you have to take smaller steps. Maybe you have to do some extra mapping and more forgiving, and give yourself, like my friend said, a little more grace on the way to it. And that's okay. Just deciding the place that you are and deciding the places that you can check in with yourself along the way is going to be extremely beneficial. And also reminding yourself that you can. There is in no world, unless you're trying to make $1 million, 2 days from now. I'm sure you could figure out a way. There is no world where, if the thing that you're working on is truly meant for you, there is no world where it doesn't happen for you. There is in no world, there's not a world, whatever that saying is that I'm trying to say. There isn't a world that exists that doesn't include that thing if it's meant for you. So when you look at this thing that you've written down and you've sat with yourself and you've mapped it out and decided that you're going to go for it, you have to assume that it is already in the future for you. You just have to. There is no way around that. You have to decide that it is meant for you. And then you have to be flexible in the ways that you get there. And that's really the only goal. That is the method. So when you're coming into this year and looking at 2021, 2021, 2021.
It is weird to say.
Yeah, that was really weird. When you're looking at this year, guys, for the love of all that is holy, pick anything that feels like it is part of your core. And if that thing that is part of your core today is eating French fries and you're going to start tomorrow, eat the damn French fries. Okay? Do the thing that is going to allow you ultimately to bring your best foot forward, no matter what that means for you today. And I think that pretty much wraps up resolutions. Dave, you have anything you want to add to that?
I actually had just a couple of notes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm making sure I get my level to the right area here.
Let's hear it. Dave has to adjust his mic first.
Yeah, I didn't. It's very hard for me to sit back and be quiet, so I had to make sure I just turned the mic off.
You did a fantastic job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I think one of the keys that you talked about that I just wanted to emphasize was it all takes work. You're not going to just be able to wake up and be like, I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. That's just what it is.
Absolutely.
It's going to take work. And for whatever your resolution is, you should definitely have a plan. No matter when you do it, whether it's New Year's or whenever you do it, you should have a plan and realize it's going to take work. Realize that there's going to be setbacks, like you said. Some that are in your control, some that are without your control. But we're not perfect, so those things are going to happen. And give yourself that grace. That's one of the things I had on here, forgiveness when stuck. And the other thing was set achievable goals. Mm-hmm. Like for me, maybe a New Year's resolution would be, even though I don't smoke very much anymore, I've got somewhat of a rein on it, but quit smoking cigarettes altogether. Well, if I just say, well, I'm never going to have another cigarette, that might be a really unattainable goal.
Yeah.
And it'll lead me towards a trap of, okay, well, I'm going to have this cigarette now, and so fuck it, I'm done. So I had on here, set achievable goals and then keep pushing the finish line forward.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to have a cigarette this week, or I'm only going to have 2 cigarettes this week. And then when you accomplish that goal, then you push it further away.
Yeah, absolutely. The science behind that, just to get a little nerdy on you, is like the willpower thing that I talked about is you have neural pathways in your brain, right? Which you know.
Right.
So in the instance where, let's say it's something like you come home from work, and if smoking is your thing that you're trying to give up, you come home from work and you have had a horrific day, your brain, your willpower is exhausted, and your brain wants to fall into that neural pathway, which is essentially a canyon in your brain.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to, bypass the canyon. Your brain says, cigarette will make you feel better.
Right.
And if your willpower is exhausted, you're not going to be able to say, no, that's not going to make me feel better. Making you feel better is your why for this reason that you want to stop, but you don't have the willpower to say that. So you're probably going to have that cigarette. So having, those reinforcements, like, this is why I want to stop smoking.
Right. Remind yourself of that reinforcement.
And
Find
it's going to take
base.
time. It's going to take time to dig a new Grand Canyon, dig a new neural pathway in your brain.
Yeah, it's like, for lack of a better term, you've already formed this habit, so it's what your brain goes towards.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why they call them bad habits.
Yeah, you gotta break the cycle.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to talk about was just because a lot of people, as crazy as it may seem, may not know who like Wim Hof is at all.
Yeah, that's kind of why I just said his name and kind of left it out there.
Yeah.
Wim Hof is also known as the Iceman. I think he has 6 or 8 Guinness World Records, but Wim Hof, in a nutshell, is someone who has adopted a breathing technique and cold therapy to allow himself to have mind control over his nervous system, basically. You think that about sums him up?
Yeah, and he's just done like seriously crazy things. Like one of them is like climb Mount Everest with barely any clothes on, and or whatever. He's done just amazing things.
Yeah.
It really shows what the mind is capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And as I always say, I fully believe in embracing the cold as much as possible, and I always
that you do.
I always say the cold makes you a warrior.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing. I started my cold showers today, and it was not a fun end to my shower. But when I got out,
you feel great.
Less things bothered me today.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
you're a lot less stressed. I take cold showers right now, not necessarily by choice, but it's something that I may stick with.
Yeah.
And even when I leave the gym, I always do. And my sister thought I was crazy for it because it was like, I don't know, 17 degrees the other day.
Yeah.
And I take my shirt off when I go outside. I don't put my coat on. I take my shirt off and I take a slow walk to the car.
That'll just translate into everything that you want to achieve, though. You kind of take away that comfort zone for yourself.
Yeah.
And your brain goes, oh, what other comfort zones can I overcome?
Yeah.
Which other ways can I excel past these limits that I've set for myself?
Yeah. I feel bad for people in California. They don't get to experience this cold.
No, the cold. I know. I was thinking that too. I was like, what am I going to do in the summer when I can't just go jump in the snowy cold creek?
we'll have to find
the bathtub. That's less fun.
Yeah, it's nowhere near as fun.
Less dangerous.
Yeah.
My adventure senses are decreased.
Maybe I'll just have random ice water buckets around, and I'll just splash you with them from time to time.
God damn it! Not this. Not in the middle of my day.
In the middle of a podcast.
Yeah, in the middle of a podcast.
In the middle of this Be Kind podcast, Dave is going to be a jerk.
The new ice bucket challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Do you have any other notes?
No, I think that was really it. I feel like I had a couple other things I wanted to go, but I think you covered it all pretty well. I think you did a great job.
Thank you. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope that while setting or not setting your New Year's resolutions or goals that you want for yourself, that you feel more empowered to do so in a healthy way. And as always, you can reach out to me on social media. I think that, did we put that in the last show notes? Did we put my social media in the last show notes? I also had a little brief coming to realization that I need to change my social media because saying dot on the either side of the M is just not sufficient.
Well, it's not correct.
It's not correct.
Hold on. Yeah, I didn't even have my mic up. Yeah, it's not correct.
Not correct.
It's a dot on both sides.
Yes. But you can always find me at bekind.amanda@gmail.com. Feel free to send me an email about things that you'd like me to talk about or topics that you might feel kind of nervous to talk about out loud. And I will do my best to air those things out. Yeah. Thank you guys for being here today. Thanks for listening.
And remember to be kind.
Peace out.